When I was 8 years old, my dad took me mini golfing for the first time. And he said, Samantha, here's a ball, and there's a hole. The point of this game is to get this ball with this stick into that hole. So this is what Samantha did. She put the ball on the ground, she took the stick, and then she did this. I figured that if I could just get that ball a little bit closer to the hole with every stroke I did, I'd eventually get it in the hole. And of course my dad and my sister, they laughed at me really loudly because they had forgotten to mention that the first purpose of the game is actually to do that in as few strokes as possible. But inadvertently, I had discovered the agile way of doing things. And I still use this in my everyday practice. Before we get to that though, who is Samantha? I am not a coder, even though I try really hard to be, even though I fool some people by thinking I'm a coder, I'm actually not. I am trained as a designer, having studied industrial design engineering in Delft. And during that studies, I actually discovered I'm not a designer at all, because for me, designing is all about making choices. And I think that's really, really hard to do, because I don't know whether A or B is the best way to go. So I think as a designer, you have to have a good gut feeling, and you have to go for that. What I love doing is I like researching stuff. I like diving into what people really, who people really are. I like figuring out what they need and what they do, and seeing the value in that and using that to enhance designers' gut feelings. So this is what I do for freelance business. This is my worldview. This is me. I'm a little girl. And that's the big world we all live in. But this big world actually doesn't consist of one big world. It consists of lots of little worlds. For instance, I live in the little world of playing the piano. Because of that, I know exactly how much pressure to put on that one key. So I can make the piano make just enough sound to actually be heard by people. I also live in the little world of sitting in a train every day, going to places. So I know exactly in which train I have to sit at the front, in which train I have to sit at the end, to be able to catch the tram that I have to catch afterwards. I also live in the little world of baking cookies and stuff like that. I don't live in the little world of fancy cars or ramen noodles. A friend of mine, he told me a story that was really cool, I thought. He lives in the little world of ramen noodles. He used to live in Japan, and there he said most ramen restaurants will let you choose what you want in your ramen and how thick your ramen is, but only a couple of restaurants in a specific part of Japan will let you also choose the amount of fat in the tube. So I thought, wow, that's a great example of a little world he's in and I know nothing about. I think it's really, really interesting to see how we all live in our own little worlds, how they sometimes overlap and how they sometimes don't. Now, why is this important? I think this is important because diving into people's little worlds is the key to making great products. You can't make a product that fits your user well, that actually lets him do something that he couldn't do otherwise if you don't know about the world they live in. So how do I do that? We do that by, well, I like paying attention to these four things in the research I do. First of all, there's the user. You have to know who you're designing for. Second of all, there's the actual use, and also which features to put in your app and which features to leave out. Then there's the context of use, the place of use, the mindset of people, what they don't do and don't know, where they are. If you're running to catch a train, you have a very different mindset from when you're actually sitting in a train playing a game. So this is the context they have to take into account. And the time of your app too. And with time I mean there's processes that take place before you actually use the app and processes that take place afterwards. And also within your app, there's also tinier processes that play a role. If you don't know about this, you can't design something that's worthwhile using for a user. Now, to quickly run past these 4 things I think important in research and design. This is me twice. Here you might see like a beach chick, and I look a bit apprehensive because I'm actually not a beach chick. This is my first time scuba diving, and I was kind of scared, I think. The second one is me, and you might think, wow, that's a girl that likes nice clothes. But if you look at my bag, you see that I actually don't really care about that. And I look a bit apprehensive too, because we were supposed to attend a wedding and we were too late for it. So my point is, this is actually 2 ways of looking at me, and it's not who I am, because this is who I am. This is a blog post, or sorry, a Facebook post of me. This is much more Samantha. One of my closest friends said, this is exactly what I think your post would look like if you wake up in the morning. So my point is, if you dig deeper, if you really ask people, okay, what are you? Who are you? And of course you can't ask that because people don't know the answer, but that's the trick of UX research. You have to know how to get the answer out of these people. Then you can get valuable things that you can use, so you can make a product that fits their vision and fits their worldview. The second thing was the what of an app. If I now ask you to think about what it would look like if someone would be calling with a mobile phone, just imagine it in your mind for a second, okay? Would that more be like the left one or the right one? People actually do this. I've seen a woman this morning that did this. So this is not this one girl. I see it happen all the time. This is actually use people. This is what people do. And if you aren't curious what actual use is, you won't learn from it. I think if you keep looking at actual use, you'll learn what people actually do. And you can either adapt your product, or you can say, okay, I need to do something about that because they don't really understand what it's for. But actual use is a great teacher, so you can make a product that is awesome, basically. Context of use. With that, I mean the whole situation surrounding the use of your app. I think this is a great example because these are window washers, and they're washing the windows of a children's hospital somewhere. I think this is a real good example of this, because how awesome would it be to be lying in the bed, you're sick, you're a kid, I don't know how old you are, and there's Spider-Man washing your window. How cool is that? So these people took into account what context they would be washing windows in, and then played around with that. They made use of the context to make something that's more than just the function of what it's supposed to be. Fourth one is the time of things, the processes you're involved in as a user. All Recipes is a good example, I think, because they have an app that lets you, you can shake your phone around and it'll have a randomized recipe, a brainstorm thing. You can make use of that or not. You can also just sit on your couch with your laptop, go to the website and think, okay, I want to have this for dinner. Then you can load it in your shopping basket, take your phone with you, go to the Albert Heijn, because that's what we have here in Holland, the Albert Heijn or any other supermarket, and buy all the things from your shopping list on your iPhone. Then you can return home, load the recipe on your iPad, which you see here, the iPad app, and that will show you step by step how to make the recipe. And what I think is really good about this app is that they used really big buttons. So, you know, imagine you're doing stuff, you're washing your hands, you're making your hands greasy and dirty, and then you have to touch that brand new iPad. You don't want to do that, so they made big buttons, so you can also kind of push like that, or like this person is doing good like that. They took into account the context, they took into account what comes before and after the use of the app, and I think that's a good way of making apps. So I pay attention to these 4 things whenever I do research in UX for products, for apps. And I've learned that in my 2 years of freelancing, that what I think UX research looks like has nothing to do with what other people think it looks like. There's lots of misconceptions about UX research, and I'd like them to run them by you, so we can do something with that later. First one, we think the process is linear. You start with research, then you do some designing, and you do some developing. Or maybe you start with design, then you user test some, and then you develop it, then it's done, and you launch, and that's it. For me, if we go back to my mini golf game, that's something like looking at the ball, looking at the hole, closing your eyes, and hoping for a hole-in-one. If you do that just once, this is what you get. We also think that we need a large number of participants. We are so afraid of bias in our sample that we think we need more than we actually need. If you want to correct for age, if you want to correct for gender, if you want to correct for, I don't know what, a location, or maybe something like advanced use or beginning use, you end up with 36 participants. And it's really easy to end up with 36 participants. Also, we think we need to research everything, because it's very human to think, oh, this is something we need to figure out. We really should do that, yeah. But then all the other questions start popping up in your mind, and you really want to research that too. Yeah, it's really easy to want to do everything, and if you think you only get one shot at it, if you only have one chance to do research, you want to do everything because you want to know something about everything. Some clients ask me, do you do video analysis? We love video analysis because we're afraid we'll miss something. We're afraid we won't be seeing everything we need to be seeing. So this is why people want this. It creates a bunch of data. And I'm the poor person who has to interpret that data and then write a 80-page, 11-point report out of it that nobody will read and that will end up in the bottom of the drawer. So, should we just do this then? Of course not. This is a very negative way of seeing things, I understand that. But I think, yeah, we shouldn't scrap UX research because we don't live in a laboratory. We live in the real world. We make apps for real people, and these real people are out there. You can look them in the eye, you can ask them stuff, you can do stuff together with them so you can learn from them. And because we live in this real world with real people, it is interesting to actually find this out and actually find out how we can learn from them. I think we can learn from Agile. I think if we reduce the waste and if we come up with a smarter way and a more efficient way of implementing UX research in our processes, then we can really start making awesome things, really good things. So before I get into this, one quick note. I'm not here to discuss the difference between Agile and Lean and all that sort of thing. I'm not interested in that sort of discussion. I'm happy to do that afterwards. But for my talk, I just want to talk about more the philosophy behind Agile, the way we think when we think about Agile, and less about the words and the methodologies behind it. So, before I go into this, one thing. Could you all please stand up? I'm very curious about this. If you're a total newbie at Agile, please sit down. And if you think you know a lot about Agile, please make yourselves as big as possible.
I already am.
All right. Okay. Thanks. Thank you so much. So you guys know some about Agile. This is good. I'll keep it short. Some Agile principles that I find attractive to implement in my work are these. I really believe that a lot of smaller steps in the general direction of, in which you want to go are so much smarter than one giant step in the wrong direction. So by making it small, you can win something. Iterate, iterate, iterate. That's the second one. You don't have to get it right the first time if you know that the fifth. Also, don't be afraid to change something you just made, and don't be afraid to finish something that might be changed later. We need this flexibility to be able to, to be able to go where we want to end up. I think this one is a really interesting one because if you think about my mini golf game here, it'll kind of the parallel is kind of like what would happen if you would do one stroke every 2 seconds. Would you still end up there even though you can't really aim that well? I think you can. I think if you fix the time still and end up with a finished product after every stroke, every sprint, whatever you want to call it, you'll get to where you want to be. Agile, to me, is kind of an occupied development or an occupied process. You give power to the team. The team has the power to make the decisions. And I think if we take it one step further, maybe we should be involving the real user in this and using UX in Agile Way, research in Agile Way, to also have influence in the decisions that should be made in the project. And last, the product is documentation. I can describe in an infinite number of words where that ball is and where the hole is, but if I just make a picture, that's good enough to know where it actually is. So the product is documentation. So, excuse me. If we implement these lessons and put them on our preconceptions, misconceptions, then what do we get? We get the following things. The process is not a linear process. Of course, it's a loop. If you make the loop small, and if you keep iterating, you get somewhere. I think this is a really interesting example. This is a startup called, help me out here?
Transgenies.
Transgenies. I thought it was a name, but called Transgenies. And together we wanted to bring this concept in the world. The idea is that you can make a profile, and by making that profile you can see who you are and how you fit in a team. So the technology behind it can place people together that already work well in a team. That's the idea behind it. We wanted to put this in the world, and I think within 10 days I did 4, maybe 5 tiny little researches. Just 10 days. First thing I did, I sent a screenshot to a couple of people, like 5 of them, asking them what their first impression was. What came out of that is that they liked the color, they liked how it was open, happy, and they weren't so sure about the amount of text, but they couldn't actually read it because it was so tiny. So we worked with that. We made a prototype of the website that I user tested with a couple of people. And from that user test, it became clear that people really, there was a lot of text on there, but they didn't really understand what it was about. So we thought, okay, we have to do something about this because they need to understand what this is about. We came up with a visual consisting of 3 different pictures. And the way these pictures were placed or what was on the pictures was also a question. So I tested that with a couple of people at an event. And they said, yeah, I like this one best because of this, or I don't understand that one very well. So you learn from that. We picked one, we hired a graphic designer that made pretty pictures out of it, and then we thought we were done. But then I noticed that we were having all these discussions about what the labeling should be of these pictures. What should be the words that accompany these pictures? So then I thought, you know what? We were discussing that for half an hour. I'll just jump on a bus, go somewhere where I know our target group is, and I'll just ask them. So this is me asking them to put the labels on the pictures to get a clear message across. And that provided us with the information we needed. So we could make, within 10 days, we could make something so much better, I think, than we would have done if we wouldn't have done this all the time. The number of participants. Remember those 36 participants? I think we can just start with 4 and add more if needed. Of course, there could be a bias in just 4 people, but if you iterate, if you know that you'll do more research, you'll find out whether the bias is there or not. If you're still there, you can keep thinking about it. You can, you know, adjust your vision about it. This is a project for Delft Mama. Delft Mama is a non-profit organization in Delft for expat mothers or mothers-to-be. So this is a really small target group. They were working on their new website and they asked me, Samantha, can you please look at it with us? So I did, and I talked with 4 moms. Well, first I talked with the organization themselves and they said, okay, we think that providing information is the most important thing for these people because they don't know what the food file is and they don't know where to put the speelzalen are and stuff like that. So I said, okay, let me just talk to some moms. I did, just 4 of them. They all said the same. They said, you know, I can Google all that myself. I have my mother and my mother-in-law and my sister living somewhere in Bulgaria or something like that. I can't call them up because they don't know what the speelzalen is. What I really need is a friend that stands next to me, holds my hand, and tells me what the most important thing to consider is now. In Delft, in this country, I don't know, with this big new adventure of a baby and stuff like that. So for them, what was most important was the community behind Delft Mama. So I went back to Delft Mama and said, look guys, it's good that you have all this info, but this is not what your people need. What your people really need is to know when the events are. So please put the calendar up somewhere big, conspicuous on the website. Please provide an easy way of signing up and let the forum be easily accessible, stuff like that. This is what your user wants. I only needed 4 participants for that. I didn't need to look further than that. It's really easy to want to know all the answers to all the questions you have in your head. But I think prioritizing is even more important. Start with 1. See what comes from that. If you think about it, you can also change your user stories into questions. Research questions if you want, and put them on your product backlog. So you can prioritize and see which ones you really need for the next sprint. In my graduation project was an app for people with a mental impairment. And there I learned this because I did a lot of research there. It was a really cool project for me. I really wanted to know everything about these people because they're so different. They live in such a different world and I wanted to know everything about it. So at a certain moment I had all this info. I had this giant heap of information and useful things and data and everything. And I kind of drowned in it because I didn't really know which way I should be designing my app. I could go for, okay, what are favorite activities? I was making an agenda app, a calendar app. I could go for what were favorite activities, what were should I also do birthdays and stuff of grandmas because that's important for them, or should I focus on brushing your teeth and how to do that and when to do that? So I didn't know anymore until I figured out that I should prioritize. And what was most important for me in this project was that these people were supported in knowing when to do something and what exactly to do. And by prioritizing, I could design my product and I could make something really cool out of it. Our video analysis. I had a project once where I did do video analysis because I wanted to know what the difference was between doing it and not doing it. I had 16 participants and I analyzed my notes, because I also took notes of course, within 2 hours. And let's see, I think I did video analysis for 6 of them, which took me, I don't know, twice as long or something like that. So and I did not get any more value out of my video analysis. So for me, video analysis are good because you can get extract examples from it for your client, and because they show you your client what it's about and how silly your participants are sometimes, that your product is really much harder than you think it is. But really for the analysis itself, I think that bringing a colleague with you, or maybe even your client with you, having 2 pairs of brains, 2 pairs of eyes, and discussing afterwards what were the most important parts, the Steve Krug way, is very much quicker, very much leaner, and you get the same value out of it. So, this poor person that had to interpret the data, I like changing that into this. I think that you can involve the whole team into doing your analysis. I think that if you work together, you have different insights and your analysis is more valuable. I did a project for Conference Compass, which is an app for people that are attending scientific conferences. And there I visited 2 days of one conference, because you always want to do research in context, of course. And I asked people, okay, which questions are inside your head now? So that was my data. I also did some usability tests there. That was my data. And together with the team that built this app, we analyzed this in a workshop. So we did some customer journeying, we did some road mapping, we did lots of other things too. And they actually analyzed it themselves. Of course, I looked at the data beforehand, and so I kind of knew what there was, but I wanted them to reach their own conclusions because they know so much more about this whole world than I do. So together with them, I did this in 2 workshops, and afterwards the boss said to me, Samantha, that was so very useful to do that, because this was the first time I had all my people together in one room working on the same project. So that's the added value of doing these things with your whole team, because they actually build up some team spirit too, which was, of course, very nice for me to hear. What about this deliverable? Well, I don't like writing reports anymore. I used to like it, but I don't anymore. What I like is to make something, actually make a tool that lets people discuss your findings afterwards, your insights. So what I like doing is I like making a big visual thing that you can actually stick to your wall, so people in the team can go like, oh, remember, this person here did this and this and this, so I think we should make a video out of it. And then the other person can say, well, that's true, but here and here and here, this and this and this happened, so maybe we should reconsider that, because I don't think that's a good idea. If you evoke discussions with your findings, with your insights, it keeps it alive. It keeps it within the process, instead of, okay, we heard this, now we move on and we don't use the data at all. So this is the deliverable I made for Conference Compass with the 3 most important things we came up with. This is actually all the data of the 2 workshops, with the user stories there, stuff like that. So you can't read it, but I asked them what they thought of it. They thought it was great, which made me happy. And this is their thing. It's an A0 poster, so now it's hanging in their office, which I think is pretty awesome. Having said all that, I have been wondering how to maximize these ideas in practice. So I'd like to discuss this with you and see what you think of it, because I don't know yet. So how can we make this happen? Well, one way of thinking about it is that someone within the Scrum team, or maybe the whole Scrum team, could be focused a bit more on UX research. And we can focus, we can think more about the questions that we have, and we can check that with the real people in the real world, the real users, so we can find out what's important for them. This could be what it could look like in a Scrum project. You could start with gathering some insights by asking questions to your users. That could feed design, so design could make decisions based on their gut feeling and on the data they got in the real world. They can design stuff which feeds development, but which also raises new questions, so you can go on with your research. You can dive deeper in the world of the users. And like that, development can also come up with questions that you could also research in the real world. Of course, you need to pay attention to not do this too much. So all the questions you have, you might put in your product backlog, and you have to prioritize which ones are really important now. And if there's none of them, fine. If there's a lot of them, then you should prioritize which one you should do first, I think. Another way of thinking about it is that maybe we even need a new role in Scrum here. User advocate? I don't know. Could be possible. And there's something that has been bugging me a bit. People say a product owner is supposed to represent all the stakeholders in a project. And I've heard a lot that actually they mostly represent the guy with the big bag of money. So maybe we should just change the mindset of product owners and put those users in there. Do some UX research so you can figure out what they find important and actually use that in the decisions you make in a project. So maybe I'm not a researcher. Maybe I'm just a user-centered product owner. I don't know. To sum it up, diving into middle worlds is the key to making great products. The agile way of thinking, I think, is very important. Please integrate research a bit more in your processes, because I think it's really important to make something that fits your user and get yourself a user-centered product owner. I don't remember whether I actually won that game of mini golf that day when I was 8, but I did learn a lot from it, so I'm very grateful to that discovery that day. Thank you so much.